legendary playwright, composer and director Mbongeni Ngema will stage his production titled Black at Empress Palace next week. The play returns after a successful run at the Durban Playhouse. He's leading the show with his latest EP entitled Thina Bant Abamnyama, which he describes as a cry for help by black people. He joins us now in our studios here in Johannesburg for more on the production itself, and perhaps we can even touch on his latest accomplishments. So thank you so much for popping by, and welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Thank you so much.
There's so much to speak about when it comes to the catalogue of your work, but let's start with this latest project. It's simply titled Black. Take us through the story you're hoping to tell here.
Basically, it's an autobiography of my life, told through music and dance. It's not a play. It's an extravaganza. It's a musical extravaganza where we move from one song to the next, describing certain eras of my life, certain elements, what influenced me, which artists were the biggest influence in my life from childhood to where I am today. So it's a whole arc of my biography, but just told through music.
I find it interesting that you are involved in that project yourself, because most creatives sometimes prefer to tell other people's stories and ironically not their own.
That is true. That's what I've done all my life.
Exactly, yeah.
And I feel that it is time that I tell my own story while I can still tell it myself, instead of other people speculating, which was like to be writing all these plays, writing all this catalogue of music, and what was influencing me during all the time. So I felt like, let me tell it myself.
Yeah. How did you decide which of your story you reckon you wanted to share with the audience? Because I imagine there are sentimental moments that you'd want to keep to yourselves for all kinds of reasons, including the fact that other people may have been involved in those encounters. But there are obviously other parts of yourself that you wanted to share for the first time.
Yes, I think really the journey that I want to tell is my musical journey. It's the highlights of my musical journey. I mean, if I look back to where I started as a young boy at 11 years of age, watching my father playing the guitar, and I started picking up the guitar and playing. And during that time, it was the great era of the Beatles with their gigantic hit songs, A Hard Day's Night, A Ticket to Ride, and I started saying, oh, I like this. You know, then I started doing cover music for the Beatles, and later on, Mahlatini, Ntombi Zesimanje Manje, Abo Brasilo, etc., etc., Abo Sis Miriam Makeba. It opened my journey to music.
Absolutely. And, you know, what we find is that when we go through that kind of work, including the work of the artists you've just mentioned, we find the South African story layered in the music, essentially. And I wonder how much of that actually emerged as you were telling the story of your own musical journey, you know, the history of this country. Absolutely.
I mean, if you look at our darkest history, which we grew up in during the apartheid era, I mean, I would not have written stories like Woza Albert, plays like Asina Mali, Sarafina, Township Fever. You know, all that body of work was influenced by what I was seeing with my own eyes in the townships. And also, you know, sitting and talking and crying with people like Mamu Winnie Mandela in Orlando when this country was in flames. I mean, that sparked the idea of that great song, Freedom is Coming Tomorrow, which was the genesis of the play, Sarafina.
Absolutely, and many of us recognize it from Sarafina till this day. Speaking about that, by the way, Woza Albert sometimes still shows at the Market Theatre. You know, it's that kind of timeless work that finds resonance no matter at which era of our country's history it's being told. It was also a workshop piece, right, when it was initially put together. How much of that kind of content making, as we would say, do you still use today, you know, the kind of workshop progress?
I still do. I mean, recently I just did a play in Durban with a cast of 7 ladies, a women's story, who you find on the beachfront in Durban selling crafts and artifacts to tourists from all over the world. And, you know, myself and another lady who brought me into the production, her name is Mapule, and she said, let's go and talk to these women and find out about their lives. And I found incredible stories. Then I took the actors. I said, just go into the street, talk to people, when you come back, don't tell me what they told you, show me what they told you. And we started workshopping the piece, and we came up with a great work which was sold out at the Playhouse in Durban a few weeks ago.
And that workshopping progress can emit such magic, you know, at least if you've been able to witness it, going from essentially a blank page to being able to at some stage have, you know, a full arc of a story. As an artist yourself, I wonder how much of that process is cathartic for you too, you know, being able to watch something come alive from nothing essentially.
You know, I think if I can just take one step back, I mean, I remember we started doing that work with Percy. When we created Woza Albert, we didn't know what we were doing, but we were just workshopping, go to DOCC in Orlando and started imagining stories and watching people in the street. And then one time we were walking at Mufulo Park, and this one guy gave me a book, and he said, I don't understand this book, just read it. It was written about the greatest Polish theater director, Jerzy Grotowski. And as we were turning the pages of the book, it only confirmed what we were already doing with Percy. And I said, wow, if this director, who is studied by all universities in the world, has written this confirming exactly what we were doing intuitively, we must be on the right path. And indeed, of course, Woza Albert emerged, and it became the biggest play in the world in the early 80s. And it is, as you say, still being performed all over the world by different artists to this day.
Yeah.
So workshop theater is like jazz, you know, when you get into a room with musicians and someone just starts playing, and someone picks up a guitar and someone picks up a trumpet, and at the end of the day there's a song. You didn't know where it came from.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I know a lot about Woza Albert because, and I might be giving away the gap when it comes to our generation, but I studied Woza Albert, you know, when I was still at school. And yeah, there's so much universality in it. I think the themes that it touches on are still very relevant today. And in fact, even this piece of work that we're speaking about, part of what you're doing is highlighting the plight of black people, which in many ways some people might say is reflected in the lives of the people who died in Marshalltown, still in this democratic dispensation. So much work still needs to be done to tell those stories, at the very least, so that we're able to change those conditions. Absolutely.
I mean, I find it very absurd that our people today are still living in Kukwini at this day and age. Our people are dying of hunger and cold weather during the winter, when we have voted since 1994. I mean, we are almost 30 years into democracy, but we find that the life of a black man has not changed. Something needs to be done. Something needs to change in the leadership's minds, in the way, you know, we're going for elections next year, and there's going to be so many promises about the betterment of our people's lives. You look at schools in the townships now, the gun running in our schools, and our people are now sending our children away from the townships to go and study, those who can afford it, and go study in white schools, when we should be revamping the education system in the townships.
Absolutely.
And get rid of the drug lords that are selling drugs to our children.
You know, we often speak to academics and other experts, and I think their voice always matters on these issues. But I've always been of the opinion that there's an untapped intellectual pool from artists who ponder these issues, who study and, you know, really try analyze them intellectually, emotionally, etc. With that in mind, I wonder what you reckon is at play here. Or let me rephrase that question. I wonder where you reckon things went wrong in this country when it comes to taking stock of where we've been, where we are, and just how similar those pictures appear to be.
In my opinion, you know, and I don't think my opinion matters, but I think that as soon as we got the independence, we forgot what we actually were fighting for. Particularly the politicians. You know, they quickly forgot, and it was all about how much money can I put in my pocket.
Yeah.
How can I enrich myself as quickly as possible? So therefore, there is a blank in the leadership. After the old leadership of Mandela, there is a void, because the leadership that we have, it's all about how wealthy they are, as opposed to what they have done for the people that have voted them into power.
Yeah.
So those are stories that need to be told. But how long is it going to go on? Are we saying that 100 years from now we will still be crying foul? So therefore that means Africa does not have leadership. Africa cannot produce leaders like Lumumba, like Kwame Nkrumah, who started the first university in the world in Timbuktu. So what kind of leadership? Why can't we aspire to that kind of leadership that wanted to better the lives of the people?
Sure, absolutely. Let's speak more about Thina Bant Abamnyama. It's the leading EP of this particular work, and I imagine part of the issues it touches on is what we're speaking about already.
Definitely. I mean, there is a phrase in the song that says, because we don't have a leader. Every winter people are dying. Like people we've just said have just died in Marshalltown. It's because the lives of the people in the ground have not changed. We need to change that. That's what the EP is talking about. Basically, I mean, that runs through the whole musical, Black, that we need in all the songs that people know, freedom is coming tomorrow. It's still that cry of the people. But of course, we have some exciting songs, some dance songs like Stimela Sazozola.
Right.
That even in our abject poverty and the sadness in the township, we still love. We still have love, we still dance, we still laugh. Because we still laugh at ourselves,
right.
In how we do things. So it's about joy and tears all mixed together.
Absolutely. Before we round up, where can people watch Black?
We will be at the Emperor's Palace, at the Theatre of Marseilles, just behind O.R. Tambo International Airport, on the 15th and the 16th of this month, September, the Heritage Month.
And it sounds like, as is the case with all your work, it's not to be missed. Mbongeni Ngema, thanks very much indeed for coming through and speaking to us. Really do appreciate your time. There you have it, legendary playwright, composer and director Mbongeni Ngema.